Thumbs up. Everybody can see everything? And you guys can hear me? Perfect. Okay. So, all right. Welcome, guys. Today's our last class together over the summer, and I'll be taking a small break and vacation before maybe teaching you guys again in September. All right. Hopefully, you guys will be looking forward to those classes. However, let's end off this 8 weeks with a great class. So, today's class, we're going to be focusing on the history of Britain, continuing our last class where we talked about kind of the prehistoric and more older and ancient history of Britain. So today we're going to be focusing on more of the modern parts of it. So and this will be the second part of the history of Britain. All right. So before we begin going through all of today's information, all of today's stories, can anybody tell me what you guys learned last time? So what were some of the interesting facts that you want to share back with the group? Yes, Lyndon?
Britain was taken over by a lot of people.
Yes. So Britain, before I write down what Lyndon just said, can anybody tell me again where Britain is located and what type of land it is? Is it part of this big landmass or is it separate?
Separate, and it's in Europe.
So Britain is in Europe, and it's an island because it's separate. And again, as Lyndon said, it was taken over by a lot of people. Again, because it's an island, there's not a lot of people actually living there. So a lot of people who wanted to get more resources and get more land, like to conquer and take over England. All right. Anything else you guys remembered? Anything? Yes, Yingling.
And it was called Britannia's after.
That's correct. So after Britain got taken over by a lot of people, eventually the Romans took over Britain for a while too. And during Romans' Rome, they called Britain Britannia. Oops. That wrong. Sorry. Which just meant part of Britain that they took over. Yes, I'll take one more from Lyndon. And we can move on.
At first, England was the Picts, the Gales, and the Briton.
So it was the Picts, the Gales, and the Axons. Almost spelled that wrong. The Picts, the Gales, so the Pictic, the Galish, and the Saxons, and again, those got taken over with a lot of with the Anglos and again the Saxons. So we have the Anglo-Saxons. Perfect. Okay, let's move on, shall we? Okay. So when we left off last class, we were talking about the War of 1066, where the king at the time was fighting a lot of wars and eventually got taken over by the Belgian king. And that's where we ended off last with this really massive war, the War of 1066. So today, let's continue after that and forward time around 100 years. So during this 100 years, a lot of kings came and went, a lot of kings died, a lot of kings lost, a lot of kings won. So there's a lot of these little things that we're not going to talk about because they're pretty boring and they're not really that significant in history. So the first significant part of history I'm going to touch about today is the Magna Carta. So the Magna Carta is also called the Great Charter. And the Magna Carta was this piece of paper that was drafted and agreed by King John. So King John was the first king to agree to this charter or kind of paper. So the reason why King John wrote this paper was to make peace with a lot of the rebels that kind of popped up during this period. There was a lot of barons. Barons are kind of really small nobles, so they're kind of a bit of the aristocrats. However, they had only a bit of power, but there was so many of them that they started to rebel, and it was kind of and the king was really annoyed. So they kind of came up together to make a decision where they will create this paper in 1215 called the Magna Carta. So in 1215, on the day of 15th June, so June 15th, this paper was written called the Magna Carta. And it was supposed to limit a lot of the powers of the king and also limit the powers of the baron to kind of create this peace. And the Magna Carta is really significant because it was the first written constitution of the world, or at least in European history as we know of it. So yeah, does anybody know what a constitution means? Oh yeah, Lyndon?
I think it's basically a written piece of paper, which is basically like the law.
That's correct. So the Constitution is kind of the written law, and the Constitution is really important because usually the king or the queen, so whoever is in charge, can kind of set the law and are kind of above the law, and they're kind of not controlled by the law. However, when you have a written constitution, even the king and anybody who's in power kind of have to obey by the constitution, so they're not above the law.
I still have a question.
Yes.
When was the Magna Carta signed again? What year?
So it was signed in 1215 on June the 15th. So yeah, the reason why we have such a specific date of the Magna Carta is because it's such a significant event in history. As many of you guys know, or I hope you guys know, that even Canada has a constitution, right? A lot of the modern countries, USA, Canada, England, and I would say all of the first world countries have a constitution. And it's really important because Magna Carta kind of set this idea of a constitution because it was the first constitution. So without the Magna Carta, we wouldn't have all of this peace and the way we structure law today. Okay. Any other questions? Nope. All right. Okay, let's keep going. So, again, that was the Magna Carta signed in 1215, kind of also brought a time of peace within the United Kingdom or Britain. Because of its structure and law, it made sure that any king or any monarch was in check. So they didn't abuse their power. This is what the Magna Carta, the first constitution, did. It made sure that the kings stayed within their control and they didn't try to massacre everybody and became a dictator. So let's introduce a new thing that happened after the signing of the Magna Carta, and that would be the Black Death. So what is the Black Death? Well, the Black Death was this what we call a bubonic plague. Or you can also call it a pandemic. As most of you guys know, that's what we're kind of in right now, a pandemic where there is this really bad virus widespread throughout the world.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Oh, how do you get that picture to move?
It's one of those moving pictures. It's a
GIFs?
GIF, or it's a GIF, a YIF, or a GIF, however you pronounce it. So yeah. So the Black Death was this pandemic caused by bacteria. So our current pandemic is caused by a virus, the coronavirus. However, back then, that Black Death was caused by a bacteria. Yeah, so this Black Death lasted from around 1346 to 1353. And this was only the most crucial times and the times that the plague was the most widespread. And there's also repeated waves of the Black Death after that period of time. So the Black Death is one of the most fatal pandemics recorded in human history. So the most people ever died from a bacteria / a pandemic is from the Black Death. The Black Death caused 75 to 200 million people died. Yeah. And at that time, 75 to 200 million people was around 30 to 60% of the population. So translating that into current day, imagine the whole population of China and the East Asia just disappeared overnight. That's what Black Death did to the world in 1346 to 1353. So a quarter of the whole world just died and disappeared.
So you mean that all of the people died?
Mm-hmm.
How? I forgot.
Yeah. So they died from a bacteria.
Called coronavirus?
No, it was not the coronavirus. It was a bubonic plague. So it's a bacteria infection, and this bacteria infection was from fleas on rats. And these fleas on rats usually came from slave ships that came up from Africa. So the plague was thought to be first found in Africa and brought on ships back to Europe. Mm-hmm. All right. I see Harvey have a question.
That was so quick. Please, excuse me.
Yes. Yes, Harvey.
But doesn't the bubonic plague make you have like spots?
Yes. So it is. Mm-hmm.
It like gives you spots that will burst with this weird thing, and like anybody who touches it or touches it will also be infected.
Yes, that's correct. It was very infectious. That's why it killed so many people. Very infectious.
I also, do you know why it's called the Black Death? Because at your fingertips, it will turn like black.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
Air. It will like stop the blood from like going there.
Mm-hmm. Because it's a bacteria, it restricts your blood flow, so it cuts off circulation and makes you form these really nasty kind of like chicken pox, but really, really, really bad types, and that will kill you slowly and really painfully. And anybody who touched you would also die. So a lot of clothes had to be burned, a lot of cutlery, a lot of tools that were used by anybody who was infected. So a lot of things had to be destroyed and burnt because this plague was really, really infectious, just like the coronavirus.
It was also like put to other people like natives to the country, which were also infected because they traded, and the trading thing, the cloth or the thing had some like bubonic, like some of the liquid on it.
Mm-hmm, that's correct. And the problem back then was they didn't have masks. So they didn't have any way to protect themselves like we do. We have surgical masks, we have N95 masks that can help stop the spread of a virus. However, back then, there was no such thing as masks. So they couldn't do a lot to stop the spread of the bacteria.
They also they couldn't shower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's correct. They don't have running water as us.
Excuse me?
Yes, Harvey?
Like wasn't there like a doctor that had this weird long beak and then this face thingy?
Mm-hmm. It was a crow doctor. So back then, that was the best they could do for a mask. The crow doctor with the long beak resembles kind of a crow. And it was to signify kind of, I'm a doctor, I've been near infectious people, so stay away from me. So it was a very brave job for them, and it kept them safe because it was kind of like this mask that can make people remind people to social distance, and also it kind of act as kind of this barrier for all of the germs. And every time these doctors visit a patient, they will usually burn their clothes or some other way to thoroughly clean it, because again, the bacteria was very, very infectious.
Like the beak was actually filled with herbs for some reason.
They believe that the herbs would kind of kill the bacteria if it came close or near contact with it.
Yeah.
So again, 30 to 60% of the population died over a period of 20 years. And in 1348, 2 years after the Black Plague started, it reached London and it reached Britain, as you can see on the moving map. So it took over 200 years for Europe to gain that population back, which is a really, really long time. So 20 years of that took 200 years to kind of come back to that same number of people. So in England, particularly, over a quarter of the population have died, which killed a lot of villages and towns because they didn't have enough people to support these small communities. However, the plague also had a good impact for society because it actually brought peace for the time. With a lot of people dying, a lot of wars had to stop because people were running out of resources. So actually, the death so after the Black Death, anybody who survived actually had this really for around 100 years had this really peaceful time to enjoy themselves after the Black Death. And there was a lot of wage rises and cheap housing, because again, there's not a lot of people died, so there's not enough laborers to do things. However, there's also this mass amount of resources such as housing, so a lot of the resources became really, really cheap. And yeah, so that's a lot of information, but let's end off with something interesting. Maybe most of you guys might have heard of a nursery rhyme called Ring Around the Rosie. Yes, ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies, a tissue, we all fall down. Yes, you've heard of that. But did you know that this small nursery rhyme, Ring Around the Rosie, was actually used during the Black Death? This nursery rhyme was actually used to describe the Black Death and to warn people to stay away from people. So ring around the rosy is kind of a firm ring around those who have been affected. Pocket full of posies, a tissue, we all fall down. Meaning that if somebody sneezed or came in contact, everybody died, so we all fell down. So it was kind of this really, really, really sad nursery rhyme that you kind of learn as a child and don't know what the meaning is, but now you know. There's this nursery rhyme to talk about the Black Death, which is, I think, really interesting.
Okay, but I have a question.
Sure, Lydia.
But why is over here like not infected?
Good question, because maybe nobody lived there at the time.
Oh, so nobody lived here. Oh, so there was no infection over there.
Possibly, we don't know yet, or maybe I'm not sure, but most likely is that there's not enough information at that part, so they couldn't record anything.
Also, I have a question.
Last question.
What was my question again? I forgot. Whatever.
That's fine. Okay, Yili, you have a question?
How did the Black Death stop?
Stop. Oh, good question. So the Black Death there wasn't a cure back then. So there wasn't a cure for Black Death and bacteria. However, because the Black Death killed so many people and they killed people so fast that it it couldn't spread in time. So it kind of just died away by itself. So but however, there is a lot of conspiracies and kind of estimate and scientific guesses on what happened, but nobody actually knows. We know that the Black Death didn't just magically disappear because that's not how biology or science works. And we know that the Black Death isn't completely gone because there's been outbursts of this same bubonic plague all the way since 2013, with the last outspread of the Black Death in Madagascar in South Africa. So yeah, so
Is it still here right now?
yes, but however, we have much better control of a lot of these bacteria, and we have what's called a lot of medicines to fight this. So antibacterial medicine, antiviral medicine, and much better health and cleanness. A lot of sanitization helps
So
them.
that means we have the medicine for the fleas from rats.
Yes, that's correct. We do.
How did I even make them?
Okay.
They use rats.
Use rats. Ew, disgusting. I don't want to eat rats.
Okay. Have any of you guys heard what penicillin is?
I have
What?
Yes, so
penicillin. Can I say?
yes, sure.
Isn't penicillin like was it a fungi?
Yes, it's a fungi. And what it is, it's antibiotic.
Like it produces a special like chemical or liquid that could kill like bacteria and like viruses and no, not viruses.
That's correct. Yeah. So antibiotic is, in this case, biotic meaning bacteria. So anything that is bacteria related can be killed or cured by antibiotics, which is something that we take when you're sick, for example. So that's why the Black Death hasn't spread as much, because we found a cure for all of these bacterial infections.
Penicillin was actually not invented on purpose.
That's correct.
It
So
was by accident.
that's correct. All right.
And there are some like there are special like viruses that are called superbugs. What
So
are
this,
they really?
so superbugs are just a lot of bacteria or viruses that have mutated, and they're strong enough to withstand antibacterial and antiviral medicines.
But they can kill. Be killed by phage.
Lord of the Roses. Why does he have no hands?
This is just a statue, so that's why he doesn't have hands. Maybe it got cut off, or it just fell off because
Might
of time.
be interesting. No hands, man.
All right. Okay. Let's keep going. All right. So after 100 years after the Black Death in 1455, England was again in shambles. So they kind of had this 100 years of peaceful time where people tried to recover, and it was relatively peaceful because wars couldn't happen. There's not a lot of resources, and everything was all of the resources they had was put into restructuring and rebuilding society. However, 100 years later, Britain got into another war. This war was called the War of the Roses, which I think is a pretty poetic name. So what was the War of the Roses? Well, this war was actually just a series of civil war. So it was a bunch of these wars that got fought, called the Civil Wars. And the series of civil wars was to fight control of the throne. So a lot of different people wanted to fight for for the English throne, and they would cause chaos and wars between families or between royals to fight for it.
Teacher, the English throne. But why do they want to fight for the English throne if they could already make another throne?
Because the English throne means that they have power over all of Britain and England, which is one of the most powerful countries at the time. So they want all of the power. Mhm.
Okay, good. I'm
So,
fine.
so this civil war was mainly fought between two houses. These two houses are called the York and Lancaster houses. Yeah, so these two are the most powerful houses, so the powerful royal families of England, and they were pitted against each other to fight for the power of the throne. So what really happened? Well, in 1422, just before this war, Henry VI took over the throne at just 9 months old. So he became the most powerful person in England at 9 months old before he can walk or even talk. But when he grew up, people found out that he had little interest in politics and was a really, really weak ruler because he wasn't interested in ruling. He just wanted to have fun and waste a lot of money and go drinking. So because of
Teacher. So his mom and dad raised this child.
No, his mother and father died when he was really young. That's why he became the king at just 9 years old.
9 months.
Sorry, 9 months. Yes, thank you, Lyndon. All right. So
I
because he
also
was
have a
such
question.
Wait. Who takes care of him if he's dead? I mean, his parents are dead.
Well, they had he was a royalty, so there was a lot of servants that can take care of him.
Oh, but that's not fair without the parents' love.
Yeah. All right. Let me finish this and tell you guys more about the War of Roses, and maybe the things that I mentioned can answer your questions. And if not, I'll take answers after. Correct? So I was talking about how Henry VIII, at 9 months old, took over the throne, and when he grew up, he wasn't interested in politics, and that meant he was a really weak ruler because he didn't care about what happened to his country. So a lot of things happened, especially lawlessness. So a lot of laws weren't enforced because he was so weak and didn't care. And this made it a lot of power-hungry nobles, so other royalties, and a lot of other kings to plot behind his back. So a lot of people wanted to take his position because he was so weak. So that eventually did happen. And after the removal of King Henry VIII, the sixth, the country through 3 decades of rebellion and plotting. So in 1422, he was the king at 9 months old. And 33 years later, he was removed as the king because he was so weak. And England kind of fell into shambles as people started fighting and rebelling to fight for the throne. And eventually, this fighting stopped in 1485 when Henry Tudor was defeated Richard III. So these are the two people that were fighting for the crown mainly, Henry Tudor and Richard III. Henry Tudor won at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, which marked the beginning of a more peaceful age for the country called the Age of the Tudors, because named after Henry Tudor. All right, now I can take some of the questions you might have. Let's see.
So.
All right, Lyndon, you can go first. I see.
Does York have something to do with New York?
No, so York is just the last name. So York and Lancaster, those two are just last names of houses. So basically royal last names. And interesting fact. Yep, Lyndon.
Which one is the Tudor and which one is the
Yeah, so Tudor was part of the Yorks, and Richard was part of the Lancaster. All right. So, okay. Any other questions? Harvey, you have a question or? Nope. Okay. Let's see. Priscilla, you have a question?
No, I need to go to the washroom.
Sure, go ahead. Yes, Lydia, you have a question.
I have a question. Did Richard and Henry become friends, or did they keep on fighting for the land?
Well, again, I said Henry won the war against Richard
No.
and killed him.
I mean, this
So-
Henry.
Uh-huh.
Did he send more people out to kill the Richards, the Richard and the other Henry?
No, he was removed as a king. So probably he was killed or exiled. So he's not in the picture anymore. He kind of got thrown out because he was such weak. And he didn't care. He didn't want to be king. He wasn't interested in the power.
Oh, that's right. But his father and mother won't be surprised.
All right. Last question from Yili.
Who's the person in the picture? I mean the statue.
The picture here, I'm not exactly sure, but I'm pretty sure this picture is the picture of Henry Tudor, so the person who won the war. And to be honest, back then, a lot of the pictures or statues, looked pretty much the same because everybody looked the same because royal family tended to marry each other, so the royalty stayed within a certain group. All right. Okay. So before we go on, a very interesting fact that maybe you guys don't know is that do anybody know of a very famous film or TV series called Game of Thrones, or heard of it?
Now I heard of it.
Nope. Yeah. So again, it's a very gory and it's very, and there's a lot of blood and there's just a lot of killing in the TV show, but it's a pretty good show. The show and it's the books the show is based off is based off the War of Roses. So that's where they get this. This very, very popular show was based off the War of the Roses with York and Lancaster in that show. And maybe when you guys are older, you guys can watch it.
Watch what?
A TV show
A TV show of what?
called Game of Thrones.
Is it scary?
Yes, very. So that's why I don't recommend it. All right. Okay.
I've
seen an ad of it.
Mm-hmm.
Me too.
It's very, very popular, but it's for adults basically. And again, that the idea of Game of Thrones with different families battling, that came from the War of the Roses. All right. I see. Let's answer one more question from Yingling. We can move on.
Why is a war called Roses?
Good question. So the war was called the War of the Roses because kind of the bloodiness. Roses as red kind of signified how bad of the war it was. And yeah, the War of the Roses was just kind of a poetic way of saying a really, really bad thing that happened. And it kind of the person that killed the most stood up on top. So the foundation of this war was really bloody.
Is it that like why we wear poppies on Remembrance Day?
Yes, that's correct. It's a bit different, but yes. So the red to like signify certain meanings. All right. So the next person I want to talk about again.
Teacher,
Mhm.
this man looks like. Wait, what? He looks kind of ugly.
So we will talk about that. So yeah, Lydia, if you have any questions, please raise your hand.
Is he the
All right.
king or the Catholic people?
Yeah, we'll talk about that. All right. Okay. So Henry VIII and the Roman Catholic Church. So what about it? Well, Henry VIII is famously the king that married 6 times and was the king that kind of left the Roman Catholic Church because of his want of marrying 6 wives. Yes, Lyndon. There you go. There you go. Yes, Lyndon.
Oh, that was really fast, and I didn't really understand anything.
Divorced, beheaded, and died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. So that's the pattern of the 6 people that King Henry married. All right. Any other questions? You can raise your hand. Yes, Sean.
That time I can't unmute.
Yeah. This just lets me allow. So like when I want you to ask a question, you can. Yeah. All right, Sean. You have a question?
Now I can't unmute again. Yeah, when I turn it off.
Yeah. That's on purpose. So I don't want everybody to talk over each other, right? All right, Harvey, you have a question? Yes, Harvey.
Oh, but why does oversimplified not have it?
They do, but it's a 30-minute long video. So if you guys are interested, you guys can watch that oversimplified video. But it's also really, really confusing because King Henry VIII was such a big figure that there's a lot about it.
Oh yeah, I have it in one of my history books.
Mm-hmm. Right. Let's keep going. All right. Let's get one more from Lydia. One question, and we can.
I have a question, but yeah, Henry, she turned
Mhm.
into a horse. Like the woman turned into a horse. How is that real?
No, it wasn't real. It was just excuses Henry VIII made up to divorce or kill his wife.
Wait, why did she wanted to kill the wife, a lot of wives, and divorce?
Well, because he wanted new wives, he wanted younger wives, and the wives didn't give him a son, and he wasn't happy. And he was the king, so he could do whatever he wants.
Yeah, but then he got a son.
Yeah, but he's not satisfied, so he wants more wives.
Wow, that man.
All right, let's keep going, shall we? Sure. One more question from Lyndon, and we can move on.
Can we have Kahoot?
Yes, we will later on. All right. Okay, so 2 more things I want to talk about. First, William Shakespeare. Does anybody know about him? All right, let's go Yiling first. What do you know about him, and what?
He was a famous something, I forgot.
Famous. Let me help you finish that. Famous poet. So he is a really famous poet, and he's usually called the England's national poet because he was the most famous poet to come out of England. Anybody else? Let's see. Angela, what can you tell me?
He's a very famous poet, and then during class, one day in class, we're just making our own poet, and then like we had to just like fill in stuff, and we had to find some like details from William Shakespeare's some poets.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Again, yeah, a very famous poet from England, and he invented over 1,000 words during his lifetime that we still use today. So yeah, very, very famous poet. All right, Lyndon, you have something?
So he created a lot of plays.
Yes, that's correct. So not only was he a poet, but he was also a playwright, which meant that he wrote a lot of plays, and he performed. He got people to perform these plays. And back then, there wasn't TV. There wasn't anything you can watch. So his shows were very, very famous because they were really entertaining. So he was one of the best entertainers of his days, and he would perform these shows almost daily. All right. Any questions? I'll take one more before we move on. Yes, Lydia.
I have a question, but wait. So, but in the olden time, they would make something like a spinning wheel,
Sorry, a spinning wheel.
like there was an olden times thing that you spin it. A horse maybe like be running and a person riding on it.
I'm not sure. So yeah.
But my
But-
teacher said there was not the really point TV, but made out of hands and paints.
So paintings, maybe flipbooks.
They made like a circle thing, and then they were like there was a thing over his there and like a six.
Yeah. So back then, I think what you're talking about is maybe like the first projectors or something like that. But back then, those didn't exist. All right, Harvey, you have a question, and we can move on.
I think she's talking about like the videotape.
Yeah, and again, this is the 1500s, so those didn't exist. So nothing existed except plays and what people wrote about or performed. All right, let's go to the last thing I want to talk about. A constitutional monarchy. So in the Kingdom of England at the glorious revolution of 1688, let the constitutional monarchy, and what the constitutional monarchy was this written or this type of ruling where a lot of laws were restricted, such as the Bill of Rights and the Act of Settlement that limited a lot of the power of the monarch. So even till today, the British Queen is a constitutional monarchy. So she's still the Queen of England. However, she doesn't have any power anymore. And this change kind of happened from monarchs having power to powerless monarchs from 1625 to 1688. That's the time where things changed because of the Glorious Revolution or the British Civil War. All right. So after that kind of civil war and constitutional monarchy came the time of the great British Empire from the 1600s to the 1900s. So during this time, the British Empire started expanding far, far beyond just United Kingdom. So they established a lot of things with France, and they were able to establish a lot of things in North America. As you know, Canada is part of the Commonwealth, which recognizes the Queen as the head of state. So there was a lot of British colonies like New England, Virginia, and Maryland, which were in the United States before they had the War of Independence. And again, Nova Scotia, Quebec were under England rule. And also, maybe most of you guys know, there was something called the East India Company that traded sent ships from England to India and conquered India. Because in the 1600s, Britain took over India. And yeah, so the reason why the empire was so great because of the maritime. There were a very, very big power on the water. Nobody was even close. All of the other countries added together didn't have the power of England on the water. So that's why they could conquer a lot of these lands far away, because they had these really, really strong and very powerful ships. All right, any questions on that? And on the last two slides? Yes, Lyndon, you have a question?
Can we do Kahoot?
Yes, okay. Yeah, I know you're excited for Kahoot, but we can go on to that next. Yes, Sean?
I'm going to watch.
Sure, you can watch, you don't have to play. All right, any other questions? Yes, Lydia?
Teacher, can you say it out loud for us? Because I'm using the iPad and I cannot look at the screen because I'm in the app and I got it. Like, if I look in, I'll zoom.
Sure. All right. So before we go into the Kahoot, I want to show you guys some famous architectures of England. Does anybody know something that's famous in England? That's famous architecture that you might understand.
Famous. In England, I think the
the things were kind of expensive and kind of
Yes, Lyndon?
Big Ben.
Yes. All right, that's one. Big Ben. Anybody else? Ying?
London Eye and London Bridge.
Correct. London Eye being more of a recent attraction, but yes. And of course, Tower Bridge or London Bridge. Let's get one more from Angela.
The White Tower or Tower of London.
Yes, we've talked about so the Big Ben and also the Tower Bridge. Anybody else? Have any other ones? That's Harvey. You have your hand up. Nope. Anybody else? Is that Angela?
Oh, I forgot to.
No problem. All right. So let's talk about the first one, Big Ben or the Palace of Westminster. So the Palace of Westminster is kind of this meeting place for the House of Commons and the House of Lords. So Houses of Parliament of United Kingdom. And this place was actually built in 1016 AD. So it's actually a really, really old place. But however, the old Palace of Westminster, so the old palace, was destroyed in 1834 by a fire. So the new Palace of Westminster that you can see today in Britain is a rebuilt one. However, it's only replaced, so it's still pretty much still very similar. And yeah, that's it for today's class, and that's it for summer class too. So that will be our whole course of summer classes. And if you guys have any questions, you guys can stay behind. However, that's the end of the whole course, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys in other classes when September starts and September rolls around. But yeah, that's it for now, and I'll see you guys later.
Wait,
Bye, everyone.
I have a question.
Sure.
Was the Magna Carta the first written constitution in the world?
Yes. So that the first recorded constitution, basically back then, only recorded thing that really happened was in Europe. And so that's mostly where history has been kind of circulated around. Lydia, you have a question?
Bye.
All right,
Thank
bye,
you.
Lyndon.
About that, like
Bye, bye.
that. Why did they even wanted to fight for land, even though it's like, yeah.
They wanted money, they wanted more resources, so food, gold, trees, anything that they could get their hands on. And it's a signal of power. I want more power. If I had this land, I'm not satisfied. I want more. So that's why.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, okay. Bye.